The train hissed to a stop in the dusty little town of Red Rock, New Mexico, its whistle echoing across the endless horizon. Clara stepped down from the iron steps, her gloved hands trembling as she clutched her battered trunk. Her heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. For weeks she had traveled westward, answering the advertisement of a lonely farmer seeking a wife. She had told herself that this was her chance at a new life, far away from the small, judgmental town back east that had never forgiven her for being born poor, for daring to dream. Her dress was plain but clean, and she wore her best hat. Clara searched the platform, her eyes darting nervously over the crowd of ranch hands, merchants, and families greeting one another. At last, a tall man in a worn brown coat stepped forward. He looked her up and down with narrowed eyes. "You Clara?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes, sir," she answered softly, forcing a smile. I came as you requested." He studied her face, then her hands, then the trunk at her feet as though she were cattle at an auction. With a grunt, he turned on his heel. "Not what I expected. You'll do no good. I changed my mind." And just like that, he walked away, leaving her standing on the depot platform with nothing but her trunk, her dignity, and tears burning in her eyes. Whispers followed her. A couple of townsfolk shook their heads. Others smirked, enjoying the spectacle of a woman cast aside like unwanted freight. Clara wanted to vanish into the dust. She wanted the ground to open beneath her feet and swallow her whole. She sat down on her trunk, her eyes fixed on the departing figure of the man who had summoned her only to discard her. She had sold everything she owned for the train ticket west. She had no money for food, no family to write to, no place to go. That's when a shadow fell across her. "You left sittin' there like a stray pup, miss?" a deep, gentle voice asked. Clara looked up and saw him, a cowboy with sun-browned skin, a hat pulled low over kind eyes, and boots scuffed from long rides across the prairie. His shirt was patched, but his posture carried quiet strength. In one hand he held a coiled rope, in the other, he reached down and lifted her heavy trunk as though it weighed nothing. "Name's Luke Carter," he said. "Don't reckon it's right for a lady to be abandoned like this." Clara blinked back tears, unsure if this was kindness or mockery. I was supposed to marry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But he changed his mind." Luke's jaw tightened. He glanced at the townsfolk watching with idle curiosity, then looked back at Clara. With surprising steadiness, he said, "Well, then. If that fool walked away, he left room for someone better. Clara, you come with me. I'll call you wife." The words struck her like lightning. Gasps rippled across the platform. Clara's heart stuttered. Was he serious? "You don't even know me," she murmured. Luke tipped his hat. "Maybe not. But I know a good woman when I see one. And I know I can't leave you to fend for yourself. If you'll have me, we'll figure the rest out together." Something inside Clara cracked open, a flood of warmth rushing in where despair had been. She searched his eyes for cruelty, for hidden malice, but all she found was a quiet sincerity that made her chest ache. She swallowed hard. "Yes, I'll come." And with that, Luke Carter picked up her trunk, offered her his arm, and together they walked off the platform while the townsfolk stared in stunned silence. The Carter Ranch lay miles beyond Red Rock, a modest spread of cattle and horses framed by the open sky. Luke's mother, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes softened by kindness, met them at the porch. "This the wife you brought home, Luke?" she asked, arching a brow but smiling gently at Clara. "Yes, ma'am," Luke said firmly. "This is Clara. And she's family now." Something about the way he said it, "family now," made Clara's throat tighten. For the first time in years, she felt as though she belonged. Days turned into weeks, and Clara learned the rhythm of ranch life. She rose with the dawn, helped cook meals, mended clothes, and soon found herself laughing with Luke's younger sister as they carried laundry down to the creek. The wide sky, the sound of horses, the crackling fire at night, it all began to feel like home. And Luke was not the kind of man who spoke many words, but when he did, they mattered. He asked her what dreams she once had. He listened when she spoke of the books she loved. He never demanded, never scorned, never treated her as less. Instead, he offered partnership. And though they had begun as strangers, Clara's heart grew warm each time his hand brushed hers, each time his eyes lingered with a tenderness he never spoke aloud. One evening, a storm rolled over the plains. Lightning split the sky as the cattle spooked and scattered. Luke leapt into the saddle, calling for his brothers. Clara stood in the doorway, fear knotting her chest. Without thinking, she ran into the storm, helping gather the terrified calves into the barn. Rain soaked her dress, mud clung to her shoes, but she kept going, refusing to stand idle while the man who had rescued her from despair fought alone. When at last the storm passed, Luke rode back, weary but smiling, and found Clara leaning against the barn door, soaked but unbroken. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. "I did," she replied. "Because this is my home too. These are my people now." In that moment, Luke stepped closer, cupped her face in his calloused hands, and kissed her, not out of duty, but out of love. It was a kiss that promised partnership, trust, and a future built not from desperation but from choice. Months later, Clara returned to the depot where she had once been humiliated. But this time, she stood tall beside Luke, his arm around her shoulders, her heart full of quiet pride. The same townsfolk who had gossiped now greeted her warmly, for they had seen how she worked, how she cared, how she carried herself with dignity. They whispered no longer of pity but of admiration, for the bride once returned at the depot was now the beloved wife of a cowboy who had seen her worth when no one else did. Clara often thought of the moment Luke had lifted her trunk and spoken those simple words, "I'll call you wife." It had been an act of compassion, but more than that, it had been a seed of hope planted in her weary soul. From it grew love, belonging, and a life more beautiful than she had ever dared imagine. And so, when neighbors asked how they had met, Clara would smile, her eyes soft with memory, and say, "At the depot. I was left behind, but he picked me up." Because sometimes, the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks or perfect plans. Sometimes, they begin in the ashes of rejection, when someone chooses to see you, to claim you, and to walk beside you no matter what. And that is how Clara learned that kindness can build a home, that love can bloom from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, when the world casts you aside, one act of generosity can change everything.